Hi guys, this is Nightmare 3464. I'm going to continue reading Stay With Me Chapter 4. Alright, here we go. I woke up to darkness. I slowly opened my eyes. I looked around. I was in a dark, musty room. It only had a little sunlight seeping through the boarded windows. Dust was elevated in the air. I coughed, breathing some in. I looked down at myself, noticing that I was in a black sleeping bag, my head against a black pillow. Trying to get up, I was surprised to feel what felt like an arm wrapped around me. It kept me from getting up. I gently grabbed the sleeping bag and lifted it up so I could look under. A linking pale arm was holding me tight. For a moment, I could merely in my gloomy state. I was wondering who they belonged to. I was turning my head slightly. I froze. Jeff was laying next to me. A mask was resting on his eyes, most likely to cover them, since he had no eyelids. But his hair was messier than usual. His face was facing me, and his head was resting against my back. And he was breathing calmly. I stared a moment, looking away and around the room. It was filled with a few barrels and boxes scattered around. A rusted desk far on my right in the room, with a simple chair, few papers resting on the table, and the laptop that I saw the other night. There were two windows. One was broken and the other had glassless, and the door was on my left. I blinked and looked back at Jeff. Staring a moment, my eyes kept traveling back to the desk. I slowly began crawling out of the large sleeping bag, but only being pulled closer to Jeff. Like a child with a favorite stuffed bear, Jeff clung closer to me and held me tighter. My eyes was widened at a moment, and then I gently took his arms away from my body, long enough for me to squeeze myself out of his grasp. I stand up quietly, made my way to the desk. I saw some papers and notes. I was wondering what there was laid inside. I looked away onto the laptop. It was shut. Looking over to Jeff, who was still sleeping. I pulled the chair. It creaked. I froze and my eyes shot back at the sleeping 17-year-old. Breathing out of relief, I sat down, opening the laptop, hitting the on switch. The computer screen was turned on as soon as user screen, but it was locked. You're awake. Two arms wrapped around my shoulders as a large familiar voice rested against my ears. I pulled away off the chair and stared wide-eyed at the boy. His eye mask was now resting on his forehead, and his eyes seemed very tired, as if they only had gotten like 10 minutes of sleep. His smile seemed widened as his charcoal eyes glared, seeing me. I calmed down. Yeah. Where are we? I asked, knowing the answer, but anyway. He stepped towards me, wrapping his arms around my waist, and pulled me closer towards him, and placing his forehead against mine. Oh, silly, I thought I told you already last night, he answered cheerfully, and I looked at him with a confused face. Home? I stuttered. He pulled back and wrapped his arms from his waist. He grabbed my hands and stared into my eyes. He had a concerned look in his eyes. I couldn't tell by his face. You're going to stay here with me now. Shocked by his words, I cocked an eyebrow. Stay with him. What about my family? My friends? Everything. Stay with you? But what about school, my friends, my family? I asked, concern covering my face now. He stared a moment and then shook his head. It'll be taken care of soon. I'll need to protect you. I know what is about you. I don't want you to go back to all that. I have enemies out there who, if they have seen you with me, which I'm pretty sure one of them saw you with me last night. It's safe. This is a safe place to be with me. None of them know where I live. Luckily, but I won't take the chance with you. I was touched by his words, wondering what anyone will do without me. Masky's point of view. Last night, I quickly followed Jeff and Hoodie, keeping into the trees. We got done killing. We saw some teenagers camping out in the woods a little while ago, as we saw Jeff leaning there in the forest as we had. Confusion filled us, so we decided to see where he was running off to. We waited along for a moment, and we stopped at a house across the street where he had gotten stopped into on a roof and waited. My blue eyes scanned the house. I knew it. A girl I was secretly been following. She lived there. I thought she was, well, cute. However, Hoodie went off killing. I sneaked away and followed her. Sometimes I even watched her through her window while she was sleeping. She was beautiful when she slept. I had never really told Hoodie about me developing feelings for this girl, but to think he was starting to catch on when he saw my reaction, especially tonight. "What's up, Mask? You look tense." I blinked and looked at him. He was looking at me, well, facing me. But even with his mask, I could feel that he was staring at me. I looked back at the house and shrugged. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said. Nothing in reality. I was more concerned than fine. My eyes widened at last, as far as they could see with my mask. I saw Serena getting up, and she stood and walked over her to her bedroom door opening. She looked for a few moments, then she glanced at and grabbed her flashlight from her desk, then left the room. I became concerned and worrying. What the hell is Jeff gonna do to Serena? He better not touch her, or my heart jumped when I saw Serena running back inside. I saw her. She had a look of scare. Most likely she saw Jeff. She looked around, her dark ocean blue eyes friendly as they darted to her bed. Then she disappeared under it. It's about like 2 minutes later. Jeff walked into her room and shut the door behind him. I watched closely as he walked over to her closet and opening it and searching through it and slamming it. He turned to her desk, looked under it. Then I watched his eyes travel to her bed. I felt my grasp getting tighter on my jacket as I cleaned the sleeves in my hand. "Don't look, Jeff. Stay away from Serena," I thought. It was hopeless, even though once I thought it, he bent down and crawled under her bed. After a moment, and almost a quiet scream hit my ears. I was ready to head over there, but once I saw Jeff pull out Serena. "Mask! Damn! Hoodie noticed my tense." I ignored him, though, as I jumped right when Jeff covered Serena's mouth and pulling her on her bed, sticking his knife to her throat. Hoodie stood there as well, but not as quiet as I had, and walked up to me and looking at me with confusion. I continued watching and glaring at Jeff as he jumped back and slammed against Serena's wall across from her. Most likely paused before he could stop once more and stood up to Serena. I was ready to deal with him myself if he hurts her. Once he reached her and he grabbed her by her hands and pulling into her a hug. I felt a tug at my chest. Watching that tug did even tighter in pain when Jeff pulled back, then kissed her. I started in a brief jealousy filling me. Hoodie looked at as well. Jeff found a girl. Slindy's not gonna like this. I ignored his compliment and I was too busy glaring. The kiss finally ended. Jeff picked up Serena and took her to her window. Then he let her go down and opened it. Then he picked her up again. Then jumped out. He ran off towards the woods without thinking I was after them, keeping onto the rooftops, avoiding running into them. Hoodie was following me close behind me, asking me why we were following them. I didn't answer, I just ran. Current time. I sat up in the factory where Jeff and Serena had disappeared into. Woody leaned against the tree, keeping quiet, and as we stayed there. What was I doing? Something in me was making me stay here. I'm pretty sure later we entered to see Jeff's up to. Serena's point of view. I sat down what I guess it was a cafeteria of the factory. I and Jeff sat on a stool of the factory, considered sharing a simple sandwich. He got in after. It was good for a past moment, and I was pretty hungry. So, as there was any company, Jeff only had a few bites in his sandwich. He let me have the rest. I felt bad for him. Insisting for me to eat it, he watched me as I ate it. I wonder what he was frightened or something. When I finished, we both stood up and headed back to the room where we had slept. When I sat the time thinking, I learned a little bit more about him. So, what happened to your family? I asked, concerning why he wasn't living with them. I could see that he got tense instantly from the question. He looked closely to me as I said something in his eyes. It looked dangerous. He stared away from me a few moments and answered, "They're gone." Short answer. I was wondering where are they, but he stopped and thought. They, in the article, it had told that he killed his family. Did you? He suddenly looked at me. If he had blinked, he looked in his eyes. Then he nodded and looked away again, his hair covering his eyes now. I gave him a sad look away as well. A question came to my mom. After a moment of silence, he spoke before I could. Do I scare you, Serena? His question made me think for a moment and looked at him. I still couldn't see his eyes. I slowly shook my head. No. He still didn't look up. What do you think of me? I looked off to the wall and thought, what did I think about this murder before? I looked back with a small smile, and answered, I think you're someone who's misunderstood, who wants someone to be held on to. Silence reached into my ears. I'm wondering if the creak of the words started ringing in dead silence of the room. Before I could speak, I was tackled to the ground. Jeff's arms wrapped around me, tightening me in a hug. His head was cracked on my neck as I lay there breathing him in, surprised by the sadness of the hug. Then he lifted his head where it was held above mine, then clashing his lips against my lips. It was a forceful kiss. A blush took over my face as he gasped as he rubbed my left side with his right hand. He saw the chance and pulled his tongue into my mouth. It felt around every inch of my mouth, making my tongue play with his. He stopped suddenly, pulled back and began kissing my neck. I slowly groaned at it, wanting him to stop before anything gets too serious. I couldn't bring myself to do it. He froze, and my eyes traveled down to him. His head stood up and looked towards the window. My eyes followed his, wondering what he was staring at. He slowly turned back to me and stared for a few moments. Sorry, he muttered. He got off me and stood up. He held out his hand for me as I still stood there in shock by what happened. Likely, he grabbed my hand and lifted me up. He had a light blush on his cheeks as he stared at me. Then leaned in a rushing a position that brings confusion on his face and laying his forehead against mine. "I'll be back," he whispered, then stood up straight toward the wall and walked towards him. He opened it and left. I watched him go and looked back at the window. I could see the sky was getting dark. So I guess it was probably around 6 or 7. I yawned and walked over back to the sleeping bag. I pulled it open. After shutting myself inside, I covered myself with what looked like a cocoon. I began thinking the whole situation. It was rocking my brain. What did Jeff mean that I was his, or who are these enemies he was talking about? Thinking up, my eyes suddenly shut. I fell asleep in a minute. 2 dark shadows rested on the tree trunks who were watching me. They looked at each other and then nodded, then jumped off the trees and towards the window of the factory, silently inching towards me. The masked one with the blue eyes and the other one had a thing for me, and something was going through his mind. He wanted me to keep me as his.